It was a very difficult period of adaptation for the new environment.
H, the asylum seeker from the former Soviet country, had valid documents, so he didn't enter the expedited removal process. Once he got to New York City, though, he had to figure out what to do.
To be honest, I was scared to tell someone what happened to me. I was in depression, I realized that I should do something to help myself.
What he needed was a lawyer.
I didn't know the country, I didn't know the city, I didn't know nobody, no lawyer companies.
The only attorney you get is that if you can afford an attorney.
Nobody.
Many of the clients that we see, they've literally left their countries with the clothes on their back.
Phil Huang is a staff attorney at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights in San Francisco, California. Asylum seekers without a lawyer have to fill out the application for asylum by themselves.
When answering the following questions about your asylum or other protection claim, you should provide a detailed and specific account of the basis of your claim to asylum or other protection.
Without a lawyer, it wasn't going to be easy at all.
They just give you 2 lines, like maybe 5 lines.
I wasn't able to write it in English.
It's not enough for my story.
To the best of your ability, provide specific dates, places, and descriptions about each event or action described. You should attach documents evidencing the general conditions in the country from which you are seeking asylum or other protection, and the specific facts on which you are relying to support your claim.
I get the file from the internet. It was too short. I wanted to explain more.
It's not enough just to say, I was tortured, and somebody's going to hand you over a green card.
Laura Weitzma is a lawyer in Los Angeles who takes on asylum cases pro bono, free of charge. She used to represent the government in immigration court.
The law is such that you need to be able to present some sort of documentary corroboration, which is very hard to get. Your police report from the time the government arrested you and hauled you in, I want to see the police report. And in fact, it's those cases where they haven't a neat little package of evidence that causes you to wonder, how did they get this and is their claim actually legitimate?
Several studies have shown that you're much more likely to be granted asylum if you have a lawyer than if you go through the process on your own. A big reason for this is because you have access to supporting material like expert witnesses and country information.
Self-representation is tantamount to legal suicide. Now that I looked at it and the time and hours I spent with my lawyer, I realized, no, I couldn't have done this by self-representation.
Finding an attorney isn't easy, especially for those in detention. People end up in detention as part of the expedited removal process.
No one told me at the airport that I was going to be taken into a detention center. So I wasn't ready for that. And then, being handcuffed and then chained.
Will Coley is an immigrant rights advocate in Los Angeles.
What are the reasons for detaining asylum seekers? One of them is to ensure that they appear in court.
Often people get into the United States, they're released, and then they're never seen again.
Bill Strasburger is a spokesman for the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service, or USCIS. A separate entity administers detention.
ICE has custody of the person. Immigration Customs Enforcement has custody of the person. They'll make a determination of whether to release the person or not. Historically, they found that people in detention are more likely to appear in court for their hearing.
Will Coley disagrees, though, that detention is the only way to make people show up in court. He points to a study done in 2000 by the Vera Institute of Justice, which tracked people who'd been released into the community with supervision.
92% of those showed up in their court hearings, which is astounding. Mind you, immigration sees that as the 8% that didn't show up as being the problem.
The Elizabeth Detention Center, it basically is a windowless converted warehouse. The anonymity of it is eerie.
Alan Keller, the director of the Bellevue Center for Survivors of Torture, has spent a lot of time in New Jersey's Elizabeth Immigrant Detention Center near Newark Airport, doing medical examinations of detainees.
You go through a series of secured gates. Every time I went into these facilities, by the time I was done with an interview, I felt kind of claustrophobic.
There are about 15 immigrant detention centers in the U.S. Asylum seekers can also be held in county jails if there's no space.
It's a prison. How do you describe it? You're given prison garbs, brown. It's almost like khaki. Everything is monitored. There's an open public restroom.
In many of these places, there's only 1 hour of recreation a day that's supposedly outdoors. But in New York and New Jersey, for example, their idea of outdoor recreation is going up to the rooftop where you're surrounded by high concrete walls.
I was totally helpless. I was a cage animal.
Many asylum seekers have been tortured. That's why they fled their countries. Andy Rasmussen of the Bellevue Center for Survivors of Torture says that for someone who was tortured in jail at home, being detained in jail-like conditions in the U.S. can be traumatic.
Are they beaten in detention? Mostly not. Are they being tortured in detention? No, nothing like that. However, just being incarcerated after having gone through something terrible, it's like somebody who's been in a number of bad car accidents getting thrown right back into traffic.
There's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of despair. What is pitiable is that many of them see no light at the end of the tunnel.
The uncertainty weighs very heavily on individuals in the asylum process in general, but particularly for individuals in detention.
It goes on for every other day, every single day. You say to yourself, what's going to happen? What's the next step?
I'm normally someone who's an outgoing person, but I found that I was losing it. Once the INS have verified that my documents were authentic, I believe I should have been paroled. It was totally unnecessary to have held me for 3 months.
It's a very ad hoc, informal, totally non-transparent process of deciding who gets out.
In New Jersey, they release only about 3% of asylum seekers before their immigration hearing, which is 6 or 7 months down the road usually. Chicago, 19%. And then you look in Texas, they release well over 90%.
It seems to have to do with issues like bed space and things that don't really have to do with either the safety of the American public or the expense to the government and the hardship to the asylum seeker. It's very difficult to tell why the people who are released have been released, and it's very difficult to tell why the people who were not released before their hearing were not released.
Whether you've been released from detention or not, having a lawyer helps. Though only a small number of asylum seekers end up with one because of the costs involved. A handful of organizations work to match up asylum seekers with attorneys who will take on their cases for free, pro bono. Phil Huang coordinates the pro bono asylum program at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights in San Francisco.
Many of these attorneys work with high-priced law firms, yet for our clients they provide their services for free.
Eleanor Acer runs the asylum program at Human Rights First in New York. It's one of the biggest pro bono programs in the country.
We conduct a comprehensive interview of the individual and assess whether or not we believe the case is credible and is the person in fact entitled to refugee status.
H, the asylum seeker from the former Soviet country, contacted Human Rights First after he first arrived in the United States.
It took about 2 or 3 weeks to arrange some meeting during which I could tell them all my history, all my story. They tell me everything about the asylum system, the procedures. It's very difficult thinking about something but do not know how it will be, how long it will be. But when you have some information, you feel yourself more comfortable.
The lady who was interviewing me get a lot of time to listen to me. So a couple of weeks after, they called me and tell me that I have been accepted in their program, but they have to look for a lawyer for me.
There are many more asylum seekers who are in need of representation than there are organizations like ours to even represent them.
It was telling me, you have to wait, you have to wait, you have to wait.
Once we decide we're going to take on a case, so we recruit a lawyer. It's amazing, actually, that lawyers are very willing to step forward and take on these kinds of cases.
Asylum cases often can sell themselves because the stories that you hear are so compelling. Individuals who are fleeing the most horrendous, horrific persecution, these really are life and death cases.